Here is our theme song for a really great podcast. I'm Billy Montana and I co-host Finding My Voice, from the yucky to the funny with Kristen. Toepfer Kristen was a model and walked at New York Fashion Week. And suddenly she fell ill and had a hemorrhagic stroke. She couldn't talk for 2 years. She would watch the birds in her backyard. Doctor said she wouldn't make it. Her major victory was walking from her front door to a mailbox. Now she can walk 3 miles. She's a miracle. She's resilient and a tough Jersey girl. She is the voice of the voiceless. She has a book coming out called Finding My Voice. She is a stroke and aphasia advocate. Take a listen to this informative and real fun show.
The very first time that you asked her a question and she nodded or shook her head, was that like a point of elation for you, or?
Yeah, because that was actually, after the coma, after she got out of the ICU, still an overlook, but at that point she was able to, nod her head. No speaking, no words or anything like that. That wouldn't make any sense, not even a yes or no. But she was able to nod her head, and we were able to get some communication done that way. And even at that point, there was, learning and figuring stuff out, on both of our parts, because I noticed that in the mornings, she was better than she was in the afternoons. She was better after some sleep and, stuff like that. And we learned all these little things as we went along.
So how did it work out when I remember seeing her for the first time after the stroke at Supermodels Unlimited New York Fashion Week show, and she walked with Kim down the runway with a helmet on. So was she talking then, or no? Was she still not talking?
At that point, she was pretty conversational with me, because I kind of understood her mannerisms and what her routines were, and generally what she asks for, and I could piece it together. But it was very difficult for strangers or somebody that didn't really know her super well to understand everything that she was saying. And people were great. They really were. They were very patient with her. But I could tell, Kristen would get frustrated at times. And, I was kind of caught between giving her space and, trying to help her through some of that. And at that night at Fashion Week, I don't think there was a dry eye in the place when she was doing that.
Trust me, I know, because I'm glad I had a camera in front of my face to hide my tears, because it was emotional remembering her from, the last time I had seen her up until that with a hockey helmet. It was rough to see her like that.
Yeah.
But even though it was hard to see her like that, it was inspirational to know she made it and she was on the way to recovery.
Oh, the road from, Overlook to, the night of the stroke to that night, was incredible.
I'm sure.
Everybody kind of had their own, perceptions, I'm sure. But for me, that was a triumphant night, not an oh my God, look how hard she has it right now kind of thing,
It was definitely triumphant, yep, for sure, because for her to come back and do that, and then I remember doing her first photo shoot after the stroke, and it was a couple of years, but we were in Asheville, North Carolina, and that was like the first time I shot her from the stroke, her first photo shoot. And I I just remember her saying, "I'm back, bitches."
Yeah.
And I'm like,
some humor along the way.
So that was pretty cool. But I think it's a really cool way that how you guys started to communicate with each other. And I guess it says something for being, together for that many years, that you kind of know each other. So almost like telepathy in a way, right?
Yeah, I mean, that made it a lot easier, that we were already, you know, reaching almost 20 years together,
Yeah. But
to
Kristen
kind of
says in
figure out.
her Kristen says in her head she could say everything perfectly. I
That
could
was
say
my
she said,
understanding from the doctors, yeah, that, she knows what she wants to say.
yeah,
There's just
but
like a
she couldn't say it
disconnect.
out loud.
Yeah.
Do you know that she still had her thoughts intact?
The doctors had mentioned that to me, that, as I learn and, got educated in the whole subject myself, the type of aphasia she had and the type of stroke she had, and, some advice and statements from the doctors that, it was that she could communicate, like she knew what she needed to say, but there was a disconnect between, that and how just the brain works and getting it out, which kind
Right.
of made it very frustrating for her because, it's kind of having like a word right on the tip of your tongue. You almost remember the word or a name or, something like that. It's frustrating for us, but she had to do
Sure,
it
it's
with simple words like apple or something like that.
yeah, I'm sure it was frustrating for you because you're watching someone so smart trapped in their own mind. It has to be like very frustrating not only for her but for you to make that adaptation to know that, you know, like she's there, but she's not getting it out. So I'm sure that has to produce some kind of like not only frustration, but some sadness for you.
Sure. There was, sadness. There was a lot of fear. You don't know how she's going to land, after all this. Is this as good as she's going to get? Is she going to progress? There was still a lot of unknowns for, years, because it's such a devastating injury, to the brain. And the brain heals so slowly, that nobody could give you an answer, as to how it's all going to land or, how well she's going to get and what she's going to be able to do over the next years. You just, you go around in those circles, but we got through it.
Yeah. So let's shift to something that we had talked about two podcasts ago. She was an engineer for 20 years for UPS, and we talked about grieving your old life. So, how did she grieve her career? Did she ask about work, being that you worked there? Was there like things that she wanted to know or was sad about, or what?
Yeah, I mean, that was her having to manage some of her expectations as well. You can only stay on disability for so long before you get that dreaded phone call. And, that was a tough day for her. Then I had to sit her down and tell her, like, UPS is kind of done. You got to put that part behind you. And, that hurt her, a lot at that time.
Right, I'm sure it would, because that's the realization of, okay, I'm done with this as a career path for my future, and then not knowing like if you're going to be able to work again, or like that realization must have been like very hard for her.
Yeah, that took time to get over that one.
Yeah. Uh, so being the support system, Kristen said that you always keep pushing her, even on her down days. Give us some examples of what that looked like.
She would ask me for things, that I kind of knew she could do, and even at times when it might have been easier for both of us for me to do it. Um, I kind of pushed us both. You can do this, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, gently, and then as years go, I'm like, Kristen, no, you can do that. You don't need me to do that. You have to give a little bit of tough love with that, but also, recognize when she really is kind of down and needs a little bit of help, to be there. So it's a tight line to walk sometimes. I don't think we get it right 100% of the time, but I think we're definitely right a lot more than we're wrong. And I think her progress is a testament to that.
Yeah, were the days you wanted to give up too?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There was days, I just kind of needed a break, but we figured that out too. There was times when, just need a family member to keep an eye on her for a little bit so you can get some stuff done, to progressing to, I can, go camping for a weekend or something, as the years went on and we got more comfortable. And I wasn't so worried about like, her basic safety and stuff like that. It's, you never stop learning, we still figure stuff out.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's true in life. You got to continue to keep learning. Um, so that's pretty awesome because I don't know what the exact, statistics are, but I'm sure that there's a lot of people in this world that, especially being, fairly young, would have just even given up on the marriage and abandoned somebody. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, that speaks to a lot to the love that you have for her, that, you stuck by her through every inch of the way, and you're very
Yeah.
unselfish about it.
Yeah, I'm sure there's some terrible stories out there, but I wouldn't have it any other way, than standing by her.
Yeah, that's awesome. Um, so she mentioned you learned her language, like when she said, "Let's go on the wheels." You knew what she meant, the car. How long did it take to learn to translate for her?
Yeah, I mean, there's no answer to that because it was always evolving. Um, she would get better with the words, and then I had to, it was almost easier, but it all changed at the same time too. So this whole thing, there was no quick moments or massive realizations or massive healings. It was all very progressive and, very slow and methodical and how it went along. So it'd be like, we need to go wheels to, we need to go car or, need to go doctor. It was all very progressive.
Right. So I guess it would be an understatement if I said that if you played charades, you'd be the champions.
We would be pretty good at it for sure.
So at that point in time too, like, did you finish your sentences?
Yeah, yeah. And I actually, had to stop doing that, and catch myself, especially with the doctors and stuff. I had a couple of speech therapists correct me a couple times and put me in my place, but it was a couple of years of doing that, and I had to, pull back myself a little bit, and let her
Yeah.
struggle, a lot too, even though it was hard to watch her get frustrated and, upset and sad when she couldn't get, the
Yeah, I was just going
ideas
to
or
ask
words
that.
or thoughts across, to just let her sit there and, you know,
Yeah,
work
I was
through
just
it.
going to ask that if it frustrated her or helped her.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
mean, it definitely helped, but, I had to pull myself back sometimes.
yeah. The article says you wanted just to be able to talk to her again when she finally could speak, even if it was broken. What was that moment like for you?
Yeah. I mean, like moment, you know, I can't really say that's the right word. Um, we were happy when we got, nods. We were happy when we got yeses and nos. We were happy when we got jarbled words. Back to it just being very progressive. Each one was a win, for sure. And each one, we celebrated. Um, but the, actual communication, where we were conversational, that was such a progression, that I couldn't even really put a year on it. Like, she's better this year than she was last year, and so on and so forth. Very progressive, very like slow and tedious work.
Yeah. So let's go to the really hard stuff. Like, not that it's not hard already, but Let's talk about the schizoaffective disorder diagnosis at the beginning of 2024, I think.
Yeah,
Um,
end of 2024. Yeah.
Kristen was having delusions, paranoia, hallucinations. Walk us through that. What was some of the signs something was wrong?
It started in the summer of 2024, and I noticed some minor things that, like, okay, it could be real, could be not. It didn't really make a lot of sense, but it was in the realm of possible, or even, 50-50, right? Talking about, like issues with neighbors and, stuff like that. And that was in the summer of 2024, but by December of the same year, it was hospitalization. So that kind of came out of nowhere. And, it was another thing that we had to figure out as we went because that wasn't on our radar either.
Right.
We had to learn and we had to get educated and we had to ask questions and we had to figure out how we were going to manage that now. And I felt just as unprepared as I did with the stroke. I especially before the initial hospitalization, I had no clue what to do. Who do you call? What do you do with that?
Right.
Where do you
Yeah.
start?
What was it
What
like
is
when
it?
she was, yeah. What was it like when she was calling the cops because she was scared?
You feel terrible for her, because you're visibly terrified, and I get worried whenever she gets upset. The seizures happen and other stuff like that. But just to see somebody you care about in that much pain is hard to watch, and especially when you feel so helpless because you don't know what to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
Same with the stroke. I can't fix it.
Right.
I can't go in there and repair it. Same with this. So it's a helpless feeling. But you get educated, you learn. And then you can figure out some stuff that you can do.
Yeah. She mentioned going in and out of the inpatient at the psych ward. As her husband, how hard was it to say, we need to go to the hospital again?
Very. Especially when she was not necessarily, I don't want to say willing, but she didn't believe, that she needed that at the time. And I got to give her credit that she trusted me enough to, go with it, without, pushing back too hard.
Yeah. So how do you balance pushing her versus protecting her?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit of both, you know. Of course, my first responsibility or, worry or care is, keeping her safe, but you also want to see her
Hmm.
as happy as she can be, it's somebody you care about.
Of course. She credits you with helping her realize when things weren't real. That's a huge responsibility. So how did you handle that?
As best I could, you certainly do get stretched thin, at times. But we learned different things that help, and we learned things that, to ease some of the burden on me, and that works for her. We kind of learned that the more engaged she is with like just other people, the better she is. The more she gets out of, a certain environment, the better she is. But it took time to learn. It was a couple hospitalizations, for us to, figure it all out. But as long as you stick with it, you'll learn.
Yeah. So in some of the podcasts and also in the book, we mentioned a specific time where she's sitting there thinking that you asked her to go to dinner and she's waiting for you guys to go, but you didn't ask her. This is something that she just hallucinated about. So how did you correct her without making her feel crazy?
You got to be direct, because you can't. you gotta walk that tight line of not wanting to play into it, and also being firm at the same time.
Right.
Um, and it is a responsibility because I'm sure there's some husbands out there that maybe change their mind about going out to dinner and would be like, nah, I didn't say that. But there is a lot of responsibility to that. You got to be honest, and you got to, be direct but caring at the same time.
Exactly. Okay, so the marriage through it all, you've been together since 17, uh, since you guys were 17 years old. Uh,
Hmm.
you're now, what, in your early 40s?
I am 44.
Okay, so that's a long time.
It's a big stretch.
Um, yeah. How has this changed your marriage? Better or harder? Different love than before?
I wouldn't say different. I mean, I think it was a testament to how strong we were, before all of this happened, as well as, neither one of us were going anywhere, you know.
Right.
Yeah, you certainly have your moments of maybe feeling cheated at sometimes. Everybody
Of
else
course.
gets to, grow old together and, not have all these issues. We didn't get that, but I think it was just a testament to the foundation that we already had.
Yeah, I could imagine that you'd be looking at other couples that are happy or laughing and have no problems communicating, and I'm sure you could be very envious in those
Sure.
situations.
Definitely moments.
Yeah. In the news article, it said that you never had a normal day again. Do you have normal days now?
It's a new normal,
The new normal, yeah.
but yeah, I don't consider them abnormal anymore.
Right. You've just that
Normal
you've,
changed, to what it was, but life changes anyway. I mean, we think back to 2018 anyway, life
hmm
would be different, maybe not
yeah,
quite as drastic, but
you've adjusted to the new normal.
yep.
Yeah. So Kristen says she's different now and that you and her family notice it. Tell us about the new Kristen versus the old Kristen.
She has a drive in her now that, she had, I would see peaks of it, before the stroke, but she has this drive right now that just doesn't let up. And then the rest of us struggle to keep up with her. You know, um,
Um,
you got to give her credit for, taking all this and, having an outlet to, try to get some information to other people. And, the stuff she's done, just the therapies and stuff, all that stuff that she's given back to them. Yeah, it's incredible.
well, her journey is just beginning because she's really going to make a difference in the world, I believe. But, um, when we were talking about in the podcast about grieving her old life, one of the things I said to her is like, no matter how many years she worked for UPS or how many covers of a magazine or how many billboards she was on, uh, it's only going to be a fraction of the people's lives she touches now with the stroke and aphasia advocacy. And I believe that this is like her purpose in life, that she's touching more lives now than she would have imagined doing the modeling or working at UPS.
I absolutely believe it.
Yeah. Um, so has anything surprised you about who she's become?
The strength that she came out of that with, really was impressive. I mean, I I can't say that I would have been as strong, and I'm sure a lot of people, if they're being honest with themselves, would say the same. Might just slip into a spiral of depression or, just shutting down. But she went the opposite way, and it's rare.
Yeah. She showed what a fighter she is, for sure. Okay, so advocating together, she's walked in New York Fashion Week multiple times since the stroke. Um, what was it like to see her back on that runway? Pride, fear, relief? I mean, I know that the last time that I saw you, 2 years ago, we had taken a picture, me, you, and Kristen, and I had really did a great photo shoot of her that day. And I remember seeing you like really happy and proud. So, from your perspective, how was that all feeling for you?
Oh, proud is absolutely the right word. There's no words to describe how proud I am, and especially when you let life slow down enough and think about how far she's come, and all the different struggles and the ups and the downs, but always trending upward. It's very proud of her, proud of
Yeah,
us.
yeah. Now that she's a stroke and aphasia advocate with a podcast, a book, billboard in Times Square, did you ever imagine this is where you'd end up?
No, no. Even with the better case scenarios that run through your brain at 4 a.m. in a hospital waiting room, no, I didn't see this one coming.
Yeah. Um, what do you want people to know about being a caregiver spouse to a stroke survivor that nobody talks about?
Yeah, I mean, take your time. There's help out there for you. Um, if you're feeling stressed, you gotta talk about it. You gotta get it out there. It's not going to be easy every day, but you got to give yourself enough time, so you can actually be the caregiver that that person needs you to be.
Right. And
Whatever
that's,
it may be. It's going to be different for everybody.
yeah, and that's the one
But
thing that,
don't just suffer, and now all of a sudden two people need to get taken care of. So
well, in some ways, you're kind of like the unsung hero because people don't realize behind the scenes, um, how it alters and changes your life. And it's such a incredible testament of love that, you know, you could have just said, screw this, because a lot of selfish people would probably do that. People that didn't have such a strong marriage would do that. But it's a testimony to your love and being unselfish. And so I just want you to kind of speak to, like, to the people that are spouses, and even for the people who aren't, to just to give them an understanding of, you know, how this has changed your life.
yeah, I mean, that's another answer that's not going to be overnight or even a year. Where snap, things just changed. You gotta let life come towards you a little bit, react, try to anticipate it, but there's always going to be those surprises in life that come out of left field. And just take it slow. Listen to the experts, get educated a little bit, take your time, you can slow down. It feels like things are going 100 miles an hour, but when you stop and take a few breaths, you'll figure out that it's not as fast as you think it is.
Right. So now that Kristen's book, Finding My Voice, A Stroke Survivor's Journey, is coming out fairly soon, how does that feel? You nervous, proud? Is there anything in there that was hard to relive?
I mean, it all is, you know, even that was progressive over years, but there was, a good stretch of time there where I couldn't watch like any medical shows or anything like that without, just tearing up and thinking about it. You know, that's, it goes back to just giving yourself some time too. You're not going to always, be as stressed or as upset or as worried as you are in that moment. It's only going to get better. So just take your time with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like I said, it's all very progressive, especially with brain injuries and stuff like that. So you just have some patience.
Patience for sure, and adaptability, I imagine.
Yep.
All right. So if you could tell on September 10th, 2018, John, like you, and on September 10th, 2018, if you could tell yourself one thing then, what would it be?
And besides, just go to the hospital now. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'd have to get back to you on that one. That's a tough one. You got me. I was doing good.
Fair enough. That was a tough question for sure. What's the biggest misconception people have about stroke survivors about being married to one?
Well, I'm sure that there's a huge spectrum there. I mean, just you can have a stroke and recover and not have any deficits to never waking up again. But I think it's never going to be as bad, as those initial few weeks. That's as worse. That's as bad as it's going to get. As long as they pull through, obviously. But
Right.
it's only going to get better. You don't know how good it's going to be. You don't know how bad it's going to be. And educate yourself as best you can. Talk to the doctors, talk to the therapists. They're there to help her as well as you, and just take your time with it. Like it seems very fast, and that everything's moving 100 miles an hour, but it slows down and it gets easier.
That's good. We're going to be wrapping this up. So, Kristen says you give the best hugs, and that sometimes that's all it takes. Is it really that simple?
Sometimes.
Yeah, I can imagine. Hugs go a long way. Sometimes that's all somebody needs is just a hug. So it's good advice for people out there that sometimes people overthink things, and it could just be so simple. It's just something
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. So questions for the both of you. Is Kristen still here?
Yeah.
All right, got a couple more. We got Kristen. What do you want people to take away from your book?
I want people to know from both sides of my stroke, my stroke story, from my perspective and their perspective.
Yeah, very good. John, what do you want caregivers and family members to know?
Well, I mean, I hope anybody that reads it learns something, and can take away some positivity that they could bring into their own lives and trials and issues and challenges. Because a stroke is very similar to other brain injuries. It could be a car accident or a bicycle accident, or who knows. Brain injuries are a terrible thing, but there's a lot of similarities.
Pre-order for your book is going to start, and it's going to be found on KristenToepfer.com for all the pre-order information, and everything's going to be on also the social media link. So it's coming. I'm going to start promoting and pre-ordering your book. So what's next for you both? More advocacy work, speaking engagements, future projects?
And she's the boss. I just try to keep up.
You're just going to keep going, Kristen, keep doing more stuff, maybe another book?
Maybe.
See how this one goes?
Yeah.
It's going to go great. People are going to love this story. It's going to help so many people. And then I'm sure there'll be more podcasts that we'll do and really start making this take off. I would love to start seeing if we could put this book in the hands of hospitals for, stroke centers and rehab centers, and I think really be a big difference in people's lives. So, final thoughts for stroke survivors and their families listening right now.
What do you think?
Every stroke is different.
It's a good one.
Yeah, that's true. You happen to get one of the worst ones.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you.
So the good news is if you can do it, anybody can do it, right? Hey, look, you guys are striving now as a couple. You guys have stuck by. You show what love is all about. and you can't ask for anything more than that. And you are just a testament that every day you just keep resetting yourself and putting one foot in front of the other. And that's really like all anybody could ever ask for, because there are so many people that would just give up on life, and you haven't. And it's not that you haven't had doubts, it hasn't, like, you haven't had grief or depression. You've experienced all those things, yet you keep going. So your story deserves to be told, and I'm proud of you, and I'm proud of the both of you. And you've been in this together, and I thank God that you guys have survived and are doing well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John, for joining us today. It was really, really great. The listeners are going to really love hearing your perspective.
Anytime.